Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Welcome back.
Welcome back. I think this week of podcasting is going to be great. I mean, I know it's Thursday, but Monday we have a super special guest coming. I know we say that about all of our guests, but someone who is a friend of both Kim and I outside the podcast, as well as a friend of the podcast.
Yeah.
And so I just think oh yeah, I love when we get to share our friends with our guests. That always makes me happy.
True. Very true. So what's the topic today, Josh?
Okay. So I've been having this conversation with Bree, and because I've been having this conversation, the internet is bringing me information about this topic. But I heard someone today who was talking about this concept of part of healing, or a huge part of healing, is actually just taking responsibility. And so if it's like depression, anxiety, or even physical healing, taking responsibility for it is really important. Or political things. Like if you're unhappy with the political climate in your country, taking responsibility and taking action is what actually brings healing. And the counter side of that, or the other side of that, is that if you really want to destroy someone, you just create justifications for why they are where they are. And that it stood out to me so much because, you and I have both been talking about for quite a while about the importance of maturity and taking responsibility. And I don't know that I've ever viewed that as a path to healing. But, as contrast, I'm now looking at my life and being yeah, the times when I really made big steps forward was when I took responsibility and just said, okay, I'm going to deal with it. So I was talking with Bree about this earlier today before we recorded. And because her and I have been on this journey of healing and learning about some stuff, and it is true that sometimes the situation you are in is caused by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the fulcrum of that is, where do you sit with it? Do you then just sit and say, well, I didn't cause this, it was caused by somebody else, and that's why I am where I am, so I'm just a victim? Or do you go to the other side of the fulcrum and you say, well, this was caused by somebody else, it is why I am where I am, but it ends with me and I'm taking responsibility for it and moving forward? Those are two very different things when you're both of them looking at a situation that's out of your control, or at least has been out of your control. And I just was like, man, that's such an empowering way to look at life.
Mm-hmm.
It also requires more work, but I was like, that's how I want to live my life, is being oh, I'm unhappy with how this is, so I'm just going to take responsibility for it, whether it's your health or your income or whatever it is. I don't know, I was just curious, yeah, what your thought was with it. I know it's not super far from things we have talked about, but it made me think of, to some extent, my experience in many churches, but also a lot of friendships, and just things of yeah, who in my life have been the ones who have been who've challenged me and been well, what have you done about it? Versus the ones who are yeah, that really sucks. That sucks that happened to you. And they become your friends because you feel seen, but you don't actually grow from that.
Yeah. No, I think this is a really important uh topic in that I don't know that everyone knows that you have a decision and you have the option of whether you are a victim or not.
Mm.
So those circumstances might happen to you. You get to determine how you move forward from that. And it can be really traumatic things like, I'm not ready to be that vulnerable, but there are some really deeply traumatic things that um, have happened to me. However, after quite a few years of trying to heal from it, eventually I got to a point of forgiveness, which is actually really powerful in this because it takes you out of being a victim and it gives you control again, right? But so through some forgiveness and deciding that this isn't going to define who I am and this isn't going to dictate how I move forward, um, it can be really impactful, and it can be from like the deeply traumatic all the way to the stub your toe kind of thing that might happen. Uh, and how you deal with it is so important. And I think you really do have the power to dictate how you move forward, or if you move forward, or if you just are you going to it's like, are you going to sit as the victim or are you going to become the victor? And those are two words that are not so dissimilar when you look at them. Um, but when you get down to the meaning of them, they're quite opposite, right? And so I think there's an option here. And maybe in a situation where you don't think there's an option, there's still an option. I remember hearing from, this was years ago, and I kind of, there's an organization, something, Voice of the Martyrs. I think that's the organization.
It is an
Okay.
organization.
I went to one of their events once and heard some people speak. And I remember one girl in particular who had been um, somewhere in Asia where it's illegal to be a Christian. And she had been arrested and put in essentially a torture camp for like 3 years. And she talked about how she, the only way she got through it was by not focusing on being a victim. That, I mean, she was bloodied every day. She would walk back and forth in her little cell that she had, and it was like blood footprints of her walking back and forth, but she refused to see it as her being a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And she chose to take that mindset. And it was only through her faith that she was able to do that. But it was, what a difference. And so then she was able to, like, once she got out of that, she's able to stand and say, no, I'm not a victim and don't feel sorry for me. I am the victor in this. And then she gets to move on and empower a whole lot more people. So I think that sometimes it is a decision and it might seem like that's too simple, but mindset is it's so much, you know?
It's so much. And it's like, it is the simplest little thing that is so wildly hard to do.
Yeah.
Like that's what I've been like going over in my mind is like, and what we're talking about is not complicated, but it's challenging sometimes.
It's super
Especially if you have been in a cycle of thinking as of yourself as a victim in a situation. Like it
mm-hmm.
is hard to change that. It's tough to change that, and it colors everything you look at.
Right.
You then begin to see it in everything you look at, and it starts to feel like super hopeless. um, there's this guy that I really like on TikTok, and he talks about like um, a big part of his channel is having this like wild romanticization of your life. And it's not an ignoring of what's going on, but it's a choosing to look at it as like to either focus on the good things or to look on the hard things with hope.
Mm-hmm.
And like I think that's such a balance, because if you're talking with someone, I'm just talking to myself, not point anyone else out. Like when I'm stuck in a victim place, to just tell me, well, why don't you just think about it in a positive way? Like that's not going to work. Like,
Right.
because you're stuck in that energetic cycle. But if you can start to develop a different pattern of romanticizing your life and thinking about how great it is, then when the little bumps come, like they just don't mean as much.
Right.
Or you look at them as this positive thing. Like I was thinking today, I was like, what if every time something that I thought was challenging happened to me, I just looked at it as like going to the gym, like exercising my muscles so that I can grow, so that I can hold more weight, so that I can do more and feel better, rather than, oh, it's just another thing I got to carry. It's just another thing that's going wrong. Like it doesn't ignore the fact that it's happening. But what if you were able to change how you viewed it, which would change the impact it had on you?
For sure. I mean, I think this goes back to one of these topics that we talk about all the time, perspective,
Yeah.
right? Um, and honestly, that was a journey for, I think, both of us, maybe not exactly the same, but it was a journey to like realize how beneficial seeing other perspectives are, and
Mm-hmm.
appreciating that as opposed to rejecting it. Um, but I even think back to, I've told this story before, and so it might be redundant for some people, but when I was an early believer, my personality type, the way that I am wired, did not embrace faith easily. Okay. But I I decided to believe. And so I would wake up every day and make that decision, until one day I woke up and didn't have to decide anymore. It was just there. And I think there is some um, self training in that, right? So if it's that perspective shift that we're talking about, so instead of like, oh, this happened to me, I don't know how to get out of it, shifting to, this has happened and I'll rise above it, or whatever the thing is that you're telling yourself or you're healing from, it might be something that you have to do intentionally until all of you kind of believes it. And then you're going to start seeing freedom. And you're going to start going, wow, I actually healed from that. Like I didn't just feel better for a day, I've actually healed from that. Wow, that weight that was there, all of a sudden I don't feel it anymore. Right. And I think it's a powerful thing, that decision.
Yeah. I I love the like concept of just like little bit by little bit. Because if I look at my whole life, I'm like, that's too much to fix. But if I look at just like you take one situation, one area, and you just start day by day choosing to believe something different about it. Like, don't take the whole thing, take a little tiny piece and allow that to grow. Like, you're talking about like faith. And I'm just like, yeah, the Bible talks about like faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. And I'm like, you didn't have to grow until you had faith
The size of a
for
mountain.
the size of a mountain. You just had to get a little bit. And once you had a little bit, it was like, oh, it could be like that. It's enough to just tip the scale enough that a different possibility comes into your mind. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really all it takes to change something, is just to get enough weight on the other side to tip the scale enough that another outcome, you could see another outcome for it, or you could see the situation through a different light, just even a little bit, just any shift at all towards hope, towards life, I think is enough to like spark something inside of you to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think uh I think it would be easy to hear what we're saying and think that it's being oversimplified. And I think that it's very natural for all parts of you to be like, that is not happening.
Yeah.
But I would challenge you um, to think of that thing that you want to see change in and shift your mindset about it. Like,
Mm,
just shift your perspective a little bit. Is this, will it hurt you to do that? If it will, then maybe find some people who can support you in that way and help you find other ways. But if it's not going to hurt you to make that shift or make that decision, I mean, it's my challenge to you to do that. I mean, try it. If it won't hurt to just give it a try, then what are you going to lose?
yeah.
Maybe nothing, but maybe you'll lose a victim mentality and maybe you'll start tasting victory. And I don't, you know how people say victory's sweet?
I think that's why, like earlier, I said it's like the simplest thing that's so hard to do.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, I understand because I'm currently walking this out, that it isn't just a one moment and everything's changed, but it is possible.
Right.
It is possible.
Right. Well, and can we also talk about how comfortable trauma can be sometimes? Like it hurt and you
Mhm.
feel damaged, you feel cheated, you feel like a victim, you feel like it's not fair, you feel like this is not ideal, this is not what you want to be. But sometimes that pain and that discomfort is enough comfort to keep you from stepping into something you're not so familiar with, like freedom or being a victor or I don't know, not having pain in your shoulder anymore.
Yeah.
I know that trauma can be comfortable sometimes. It's not comfortable to be like to go through the trauma, but once that has happened and you sit with that and you are sitting in those emotions and those feelings and the resonance of what that has caused, it's so familiar that it almost can seem scary to consider something else.
Right. I
And I
mean,
get that.
that's why, like, the statement I made at the beginning was like, the people who justify what you're going through become your friends because it makes you feel seen, and it makes you, it's like, oh, someone understands what I've gone through and how hard it was. But someone who challenges you to take responsibility and to take action, they may not become your closest friends because they're going to be harsh, but they will push you to grow,
Yeah.
and ultimately will be like, I would say someone who can do that in love and walk with you through that change is probably the greatest friend you could have.
Yeah.
Someone who doesn't let you stay stuck in victimhood.
That's true.
Mm,
That's true.
yeah.
Good stuff. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Mm, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's like, I know we've said more about it, and we're going to get more uh we'll have more conversations about these things, but I think that's a good way to introduce at least this initial place.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I appreciate you bringing up this topic.
Thanks.
It's
I
good.
would love the listeners' input on like their personal experience with this, or yeah, because I think I know for sure there's been moments in my life where someone has challenged me to take responsibility for something, and I have been totally resistant and mad at them for telling me I should take responsibility. And then there's moments where like I've had people do that and I'm like, I know you're right. I don't want to do that, but I know you're right. And then things change and it's like you look back a year later and you're like, wow, this is pretty good.
That's
So
right. I just had exactly that conversation that I don't want to deal with it this morning with Farney. So,
it's amazing. Well,
well, there's
it's a good
still work to
time.
be done.
Both
Hey,
of us.
hey,
It's
I'm the
great.
first to say I'm not healed from all of the trauma that has come in my life, but I am working on it. There's forward motion.
Yes.
So I don't
Love
know. Yeah, I think we're both speaking from a place of active experience,
it. I
right?
think so. I think so.
Yes.
Good stuff.
Okay.
Well, listeners, we'll see you on Monday for a awesome interview with our friend Dr. Farney. And yeah, I hope you check that out.
Yep. See you next time. Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.